online conference. Today, our sessions are going to be dedicated to secondary and high school. So I hope that you enjoyed our yesterday's presentations, and I'm sorry if there were some technical issues. We hope that today everything is going to be perfectly normal. Before we continue, I'd like to mention that you will be able to download the certificates from our website, macmillanyukraine.com, after the end of the conference. Don't forget to receive your certificates. They will be available right after the end of the conference and or tomorrow. Right now, I'd like to give the floor to our Polish colleagues, Dr. Jacek Lagun and Dr. Czeslaw Kinski. Together, they have been working in ALT for more than 40 years. Between them,
almost 50 now.
Yeah, so they are internationally recognized speakers today, especially for you. And the first session is going to be dedicated to structuring a learning-friendly course and our newest title, which is called All Clear for Ukraine. So floor to you, Czeslaw and Jacek.
Okay, so hello, everyone.
Hello.
We'd like to say, well, it's good to see you. The problem is we can't see you. So we have a few questions, a few requests. Some of you are already typing, the places you come from. So could you please all now type the name of the place that you come from, so we can look at the script later and look at the map and see how many places we're connecting with. It's always a good experience. Okay, and in the meantime, we're going to check whether you're still there, because it's interactive one way. You can see us and you can hear us, and at the same time, we can't see you and we can't hear you. So we're going to ask you to react, okay? And one of the things is, we're going to ask you a few yes/no questions. So anytime we ask yes/no questions, we are going to ask you to type in Y for yes and N for no. Do you understand that? Yes, just Y for yes, N for no. Thank you very much. And one more thing is that we're going to tell you a few jokes.
Well, we'll try.
We'll try to tell you a few jokes. And we don't know if you're laughing or not. So anytime you can see this, can you please type in a smiley face? Could you do that now? Like, you see this, you type in a smiley face. Yeah, that works. Okay, great. Excellent, thank you. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, so we're all, teachers of teenagers, and we know it's a very hard task. And we'd like to say that, there are a few problems connected with teaching teenagers. This isn't a joke. There are a few issues with adolescents. We're teaching them, a language that they don't understand, which is like a code, right? A new code. And here we've got a few questions that we're going to read one by one. And we're going to give you like 10 seconds, to type in yes if you agree and no if you disagree.
Yeah, because we would like to see if your teenagers are more or less like our teenagers. So
yeah, so
your typical teenage student likes reading long books.
Yes or no? Okay, mostly no, and we're closing this vote. We're moving on to the next question. Your typical teenage student has a lot of life experience.
So again, lots
no,
of
we're closing the vote on this one.
Okay, so your typical teenage student finds information on the internet quickly.
Now that's a bunch of yeses. Now your typical teenager spends a lot of time on social media.
Okay. Your typical teenage student long tangents, so then focus easily whenever you talk to them.
Like, for 50 minutes, for example. Or,
yeah, 55 even.
Yeah, and they ask you for more. Okay.
Teacher talk.
Yeah. Next. Your typical teenage student uses the phrase "it depends" at least once per lesson. This is, by the way, meant to be.
Oh, it's not a joke. I mean, Polish students make this nice mistake that they don't say "it depends," they say "it's depend."
Yeah, it's depend.
Or
yeah.
it's depend from.
And it depends from, and it's like, well, there are many different ways. Well, anytime you ask them, a question, they say yes or no. Then you ask them to elaborate, and then they say it depends. Okay,
they have no ideas.
Your typical. We're going to put the last two together.
Yeah, your typical teenage student is a conscious language learner
and a reflective one. So they can reflect on their mistakes. Anytime you give them feedback, they say, yes, I get that feedback. I'm going to learn from my mistakes and I will never make the same mistakes again. No.
Okay, so basically your teenage students, some of us like our teenage students, they're not really that different. And there's one more thing connected with, the fact that our students don't like reading books, they don't like processing text. That when you teach those students, the people who like the internet, who like, sending snaps, who like going on Instagram, when you start teaching them a foreign language, you basically, send them something which looks more or less like what you can see in the slide, something which is like a code to them. They are not like Neos from the Matrix, they don't understand, they don't see the picture behind that. They see lots and lots of different letters, and we as teachers are supposed to help them. And if you take a look at the code, you will see that sometimes a string of letters can be, well, meaningless, as the first one, or if you break it down into the wrong places, into wrong kind of like parts, you will see that they still don't make sense. But if you break something down into the right kind of chunks, you will suddenly realize that something which was pointless, meaningless, something that didn't make any sense, becomes, CIA, YMCA, FBI, HBO, and DVD. So basically the idea is that we as teachers have to do this job for our students, to help them understand the code, to break it down into something that they will see as meaningful, something worth learning.
Yeah, so we've got a few problems, right? And now I think you will agree that our teenagers are the same, as you just have. Now there's another problem, and this is perhaps, the last one for today. This is the problem with teenage attention span, or we could say that, it's like human attention span. Because it's not really possible for most humans to concentrate for an hour. Of course, there are some exceptions, but
especially webinars, online webinars. Because people can focus for like 2 hours.
Yeah,
you're
2
listening
hours
to two men,
to two people.
Like, that's the best thing to do.
Type in the smileys. Okay, then, and then of course, here is a book that we would like to recommend. As your supplementary reading on attention and memory, etc. And it's called Brain Rules. It comes from John Medina, and it's an excellent read on attention. It's very reader friendly, and you can also check Dr. Medina's YouTube videos before you buy the book. And we hope that it will give you like a lot of information about it. And there's just one quote about attention that we would like to give you in a moment. Now, how long is a typical lesson in a school in your country?
That's a question to you.
Yeah, 45 minutes. Yeah, that's like Poland. Okay, so here you can see, a graph representing attention during a 50-minute, American class, which is pretty much the same as a Polish or a Ukrainian class, where you've got like very high attention, at the beginning of the class. And then, it drops. And then, as you can see, it drops and rises, towards the end. And as teachers, we know why it rises towards the end.
And just finally, you're waiting for the bell to ring, so what's going to happen, the homework, and then you can leave.
Yeah, and some people may be excited about, what kind of homework they're going to get. So anyway, the idea is that, most people can't concentrate, for 50 minutes. As John Medina says in his book, audiences, tend to check out after 10 minutes, and you can keep their attention by telling narratives or creating events that are rich in emotion. We are now about 9 minutes into this session, so you are quite likely to be losing attention in a moment. Okay, so we're going to offer you a quick reset in a moment.
But before that, we'd just like to show you that basically, if you think about that, if you start working with those resets, you will be able to keep well your audience's attention, but in our case we're teachers, it means the attention of your students. So one of the first things we'd like to say is that whenever you prepare a class, you have to think of those reset moments, every 10, every 12 minutes for your students, be it a joke, be it a story, be it a funny game to play, change of exercise, moving from grammar to reading, and making sure that your students understand that. These are all those things that can help your students focus on what you're saying, and they help them be effective, with high attention. It is possible, you just have to remember that this is how you're supposed to plan the lesson. And today we'll try to show a few different ideas, a few different tricks, a few different things we do in our classes to achieve just that.
Yes, we've decided, to break the session up into 5 main fragments. Well, you've just seen the first one, and then the next will be devoted to teaching different skills.
So let's hit the reset button.
Yeah, so we're hitting the reset button, and now the session is beginning again. And we're talking about engaging teenagers in learning vocabulary. Okay. So the first thing, whenever you present vocabulary to your students, it's just it's important, to engage them visually. The thing is that basically humans prefer to see things rather than read about them. Generally, we are like visually oriented. Not all of us, but generally we are visually oriented. But the thing is that with our students, if you learn, like if you give your students the words like train and the Ukrainian word for that, and if you give your students the words like plane and the Ukrainian word for that, you're basically just giving very little information to your student. Just like some pronunciation, something that disappears. They don't really get the whole idea that's behind the concept. And if you ask your students to work with pictures, matching pictures, working with pictures, it's like you're making sure that they see the word like taxi, and they see what's behind that. They see the idea, the concept that's behind it. They see the word tram, they take a look and they see what the concept is. And working with vocabulary, whenever it's possible, concepts are much more effective, much stronger, than just, telling your students that this is what this means and this is what that means. So this is one of the first things you have to do with your students. Use lots of visual prompting, visual suggestions. Yeah, because, knowledge of a word is definitely more than knowing its spelling, and I think you will agree. Now, so when our students are familiar with, the appearance of the word, the spelling, and the sound of the word, and we move on into different sorts of classifications. And, we start with very basic and very obvious types of classifications. So, for example, if you teach means of transport, you ask your students to divide them into, land, water, and air transport. If you're teaching, food, you will ask your students to divide, the vocabulary into, food and drink, or fruit, vegetable, meat, etc., etc. Okay, so that's a very obvious type of classification, and
it's a very important thing from the perspective of how we learn vocabulary. When we learn in our mental lexicon, we don't put words alphabetically. We put them together in different groups in semantic frames, and we put them like all the words from one group. They function together and they help us remember things which are connected. Because whenever you talk to if you think about your own language, your own understanding, somebody talks about a ship. And since it's like, what else, can move on water, you'll probably think about a kayak, you'll think about a yacht, you'll think about a few other things. So this is how we create connections, this is how we remember words better. So just giving your student the word bike and telling them this is rower, like in Polish, or in Ukrainian, doesn't work as effectively as making your student understand that bike is what you use, but also belongs to those things that we use as vehicles when we travel on the land.
Yeah, and then you can move on to something that's a bit more abstract, and we'd like you to try this now. Have you got something to write on and something to write with?
It's a yes/no question.
It's a yes/no question. All right, great. So on that piece of paper, we would now like you to to divide this piece of paper into 5 columns. Okay, so draw 5 lines, and get 5 columns on that. You can type in the word done when you're done.
Coffee break.
Yeah, end of coffee break. And now you can draw the symbols, on top of the columns, or you can write the following words, okay? Sight would be the first column, okay? Okay, next column would be hearing. And next column would be smell. Then the next one is taste. And the last one is, you can tell us, what's the last one? Touch.
Yay,
touch it
finally.
is. Okay, the last one is touch. Okay, and this is what you do with your students, and this can work with any kind of vocabulary. You've got those 5 columns, representing their, their 5 senses. And then, you've got those 10 or 12 vocabulary items during the lesson that you practice with your students, and you ask them to categorize those words into the first associations, okay? So mind you, there are no right or wrong answers because, it's your own first association. And this is something we're going to try with you. Now, we're going to tell you a few words, and we would like you to type in, the sense of your first association, okay? Ready? Ready is a yes, no question. So are you ready? Great. Okay, so there'll be 5 words, okay? And you type in the first association or the first sense. So the first one is garlic. Yummy is not.
I love the comment.
Yeah, I like the comment. Okay, so for most of us, it's smell or taste. Okay, the next one we're moving on is beach. The beach. Yes, so for some of us, you see it. For some of us, it's the touch, probably the sand. Or it's the sight, so it's the sunshine and everything. Okay. Next one, orange.
Well, I actually think about the smell of oranges.
Yeah, I think about the color of oranges. Yeah. Okay, anyway, just 2 more left. Okay, the next one is petrol.
Smell of petrol.
Yeah, petrol stations. Okay, and the last one is Jacek. What's your first association with Jacek? Some of you are still typing in smell.
Oh, you can't smell me, can you?
Touch. Okay, then. So this is how it works, and of course, this is not over. So your students...
Positive. I love that.
Thank you. What's your sense for Jacek? It's positive. Okay. Thank you very much, Julia. Okay, so what you do next with your students, after they have categorized all those items, into the 5 different senses, chances are that when you have like 10 or 12 words grouped into 5 categories, your partner is going to have the same 10 or 12 words grouped in different categories. So now the next step is that, your students talk about those words and talk about their associations. So for example, they work in pairs and they say, okay, so why did you put orange in the smell category, and why did you put orange in the sight category? So it's like they say it's because I can see the color, I can see the fruit. Oh, it's because I thought about the color, not the fruit. Or they say something like I can smell it because I had orange juice in the morning, etc. Okay, so this way you create like nice opportunities for your students to use the words in very personal meaningful contexts.
And if you think about what we told you about like creating or reset points, if you have a moment when you work with a vocabulary like that, you do reset. You stop feeling like it's a lesson. You're just talking to a friend. You express your ideas. What I also like about this exercise is just one more thing. It teaches others that we're all different. That even your best friend, a person you think you know really well, can have very different associations. It shows us that the world, well, there are lots of different people in the world, and they see the world in different ways. Now, another way of categorizing that we'd like to suggest is, just like, when you have a class with your students, you can tell them that, they can categorize the vocabulary that you teach, in 3 different groups. The first one is called the suitcase, the second one the fridge, and the third one is the bin. And whenever you have new words, from time to time, because I believe, if you use the same categorization exercises all the time, students will basically get bored anyway. So you have to kind of like change them, use different ways. But if you do that from time to time, you tell students, okay, so can you please now look at the vocabulary, look at the words, and decide which of these words are the words that you'd like to take home, because you will use them, you will use them, because you, I don't know, go to school by tram every day, so then the word tram is very important to you. Which of these would you put in the fridge? Like words you don't need now, but you think you may need in the future. And which of these would you put into the bin? Because, you would say that, bin, like you don't need these words. You'll never ever use them. Some people will say, why? What? Teacher asking students which words are useless or pointless? Well, there's a trick behind that. Because the moment your students start thinking about these words, the moment they pick a word or two, because this is usually one word out of 12 or 20, and they put this into the bin and they explain why it's in the bin, this is when they learn the word and they learn it forever. It happened to me, like I remember I was having a class and, I was talking to someone and somebody told me the word ambidextrous. Ambidextrous, like somebody who can use both hands equally well. So it's not like left-handed, not right-handed, but ambidextrous. I heard the word and my thought was, well, who's ambidextrous? Well, no ambidextrous people. Why would I need this word? And what a useless word. So many letters, I'll probably never learn it. And I learned it. But, there's that nice end to this story, because once I learned it, like a year or two later, I was in the class and one of my students was talking about her father. And she said, you know what, my dad, well, he's not left-handed, he's not right-handed, he's, and then, I look like the one who knows it all. I said, well, he's ambidextrous. And this way, joke. Thank you. Okay, so this way, it's an actual story. This way, as you can see, we learn words, we remember them, we kind of put them into categories, and that's the whole point. It's not about which word is better or not. It's like putting them into categories that we may use one day, may not, but still focusing on the words and doing something with them.
Because, well, just a quick yes/no question. When you show, new vocabulary to your students, and it's usually between 10 and, 14 words, do your students always look at those words and say, oh, teacher, I think these are all very useful words?
That doesn't happen in my classes.
No, never. Yeah, and you see, that's the point. So, but by doing this activity, we give our students a choice, to learn some things and not to learn others, knowing that in the end, they will have to learn all of them anyway.
All right. One more activity for having a reset in the class, for starting something anew. Is something which, well, we picked up at a wedding. I mean, by we, I mean me and my wife, who used to be an English teacher. She's not my wife. No. So basically, me and my wife, and we were at a wedding, and we were watching one of those wedding games. Do you have wedding games, in Ukraine, when you have to do some things, and people who fail have to drink alcohol, and people who don't fail have to drink alcohol, and basically it's all about drinking alcohol.
Many Polish games are like that.
Yes. So basically, if you do, then yeah, good. So so the idea is that one of those games was that you had 4 people sitting, so 4 chairs in the middle. 4 people were chosen that they had to sit down there, and they were given a word that they were supposed to react to, and whenever the DJ, telling a story, mentioned one of the words, the people sitting on the chairs, they had to stand up, run around the 4 chairs and sit down. If they didn't do it, if they missed it, the punishment was drinking a shot of vodka. Obviously, we're not suggesting that your students should be getting a shot of vodka in the class. No, never, ever. But the idea is that, if you, let's, for example, get your 4 students sitting, thank you very much for your reactions. If you get your students, if you put 4 chairs in the middle and you put your students there and you name them, they don't have to be great words. It could I know, hair dryer,
means of transport,
means of transport, like tram or car or taxi. And then, start telling a story that, basically create as you speak. So say, yesterday I went to the city and I used the taxi. So the student who's assigned the word taxi has to stand up and run around the church. And then say, well, the taxi didn't arrive and I was in a bit of a hurry. So I asked my best friend to pick me up in his car. And then, again, the person who was assigned the word car runs around. The point is that, you use those 4 words. Probably you have to use the most difficult words, or the words with the most difficult pronunciation, just for your students to focus. Some people say, no, what about only 4 people keep running? But if you think about that, those other people, those other students sitting there, they will be listening very carefully, to point out that one of them is not running when they should be. So this is an activity, that gives you fun, that gives you students running, and it, again, basically breaks the class down into something shorter. And it's like a reset. After that, you say, okay, come back, let's just now learn something. And your students start to be focused from the very beginning.
Yeah, and I think there's also the point we need to mention that, can you please type in like how many students you usually teach in one class? Yeah, so this is like Poland, that depending on whether, the school has got language groups or not, teachers, will be teaching between 10 or 12 up to even 30 students. And, sometimes people say, when you do an activity like this, only 4 students are engaged, but we think it's not true. Because even when you've got 4 people actively, playing this activity, all the others will be listening and perhaps, pointing things out to them. So even if, someone does not react at, at a certain point, then, somebody else in the class, will remind them. So that works. Now, we've been about 12 minutes into the second part. So it's time for a reset button. Okay, and now we're beginning this session again. And we're going to begin this part by asking you a yes/no question that is on the screen, and we would like you to type in the answer. Okay, thank you very much. And we would like to say that we kind of partly agree and disagree, because teenagers today read a lot, but it's just that their reading habits, have changed. And, when we were younger and we went to school, we had books. And we know that most of you are younger than us, but we all remember books that were made of paper. And when you started reading, you usually started on page 1, then there was page 2, then there was page 3, and so on. And there are scientists who claim that, the way you read changes the way you perceive reality. Because, when you read books that are arranged in some kind of sequence, you perceive the world as, cause and effect. Everything stems from what happened before. Now, the problem with teenagers today is that they read a lot, but they read hypertext. And I think this is your experience as well. You can think of a time when you went to a website and, you started reading something, and then, you scrolled down and then there was a video. So you played the video. Then there was inside the article, there was a link to another article. So you clicked that, and then you saw a few pictures, etc., etc. Do you sometimes read like that online?
We should be asking, are you reading like that right now online?
Yeah. Do you have okay, so you see that, our reading habits are also changing, but we remember both, right? And at the same time, while most of our students read hypertext, when it comes to examinations, there's still the old-fashioned way. So it's still paper, and it's still a narrative where they have to put events in some kind of order. And it's like coming back to the old days. And because of this clash, our teenagers sometimes, don't cope with reading the way we would like them to do. That's why we need to engage them in activities that, will allow them to focus, this old-fashioned, chronological, sequential, cause and effect way.
Okay, so one of the exercises you can do with the students is, just like you ask them to read the text, and then you tell them to take notes. Any notes, they want to take in any way they want to do it. If this is like those beautiful sketchnoting, great. If this is like only words, wonderful. If this is like, I don't know, sentences, fine. The thing is that, you ask them to do those notes, and then, at the end of the class, or a little bit later, or even like the moment that they finish reading, you ask them to tell each other what they remember from the text. Now, one thing is they'll have to focus, they'll have to remember. Another thing is, they will be surprised how they remember different things from the same text. You can also use this for another class. You ask your students to read and take notes, and then when they come to the next class, you ask them to take a look at the notes and try and retell what's in the text, a day or 2 or 3 later. So that's one of those ways when you don't just tell your students read and answer the questions, but read and take notes, because we'll be talking about the text. And this helps your students, to have some kind of motivation to read with some kind of understanding, because they will have to choose what's important in the text this way.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes you can tell your students, just as Jacek said, well, to take any notes they want to, but sometimes you can also give them ideas for notes. So before they read the text, they can see those 3 beginnings of sentences, on the board. So you can put them on the slide, or on, write them up on the board quickly. And then, while they're reading this text, they have to read this with a specific point of focus. So they have to find, one fact that's, surprising, one that's amazing, one that's strange. And then, of course, after they've read the text, they, while they're reading, they will be reading with that focus in mind. And when they have finished, they can once again compare their notes, compare what they've read, compare the things they have paid attention to, and probably once again find out that people can react to the same text in different ways. And of course, the most important thing at the back of our minds is that our students process this text and have some kind of ideas connected with it. Because we find this a lot, that we teach people who are between 14 and 17. Sometimes, when they read the text and you don't give them a point of focus, and then you ask them, so what do you remember? Very often the answer is nothing. And this is strange, because they've just seen the text, right?
Okay. Another thing that you can try with your students is something for practicing sequential thinking, or remembering things, or putting things in the right order. As Czeslaw said, the students, they work with hyperlinks, they work with a bit of text, probably we remember things like that, just like, don't read the whole text, just skip from one text to another, and then in like 17 minutes or half an hour later, you don't really remember what you started your reading with, but you're watching some videos on YouTube anyway, right? So the idea is that basically to teach our students how to work with a whole long text and how to put things in a sequence, you can try a very easy exercise. You pick 3 or 4, maybe 5 sentences, depending on how long the text is. You mix the order, you put them in front of students on the board, on a piece of paper. If you have an OHP overhead projector, you can just put them on the wall. And you tell your students, can you please look at the sentences, and without looking back at the text, can you please remember what was first, which sentence was first, which was second, which was third, and so on and so forth. And then they check it in the text, right? So this, again, you ask them to remember what was first in the text and how the text worked. Or you can just cut out pieces of the text, and again, mess it up in a way. Put it in the wrong order, and you ask your students to work with those texts and try and put them in the way they should be. Because again, making your students do something with the text makes your students focus on the text, makes your students think about the text, rather than just, sit over the book for 10 minutes pretending that they are reading, because now they won't be really checked, and they will just have to say true, false, or ABC at the end, which they can guess with true, false is 50% of a chance.
Yeah, okay? True. Now, the next one, the next activity connected with reading is based on a very powerful mechanism that, we all engage in. What happens when you put something on your social media, when, a teenager puts, let's say, a new profile picture on their social media, and they expect comments. And we think that, people tend to read more when they have some kind of interest in it.
Wait. It's not only teenagers on social media. We're going to put a photo, of us doing this for you, on our social media, Xero Brothers, so just and we'll wait for your comments.
Yeah, we'll be hoping, to get your reactions, but that's not now. And here is a question. Do you have a second window now open with Facebook on it? Type the truth.
Yes and no. I like that.
Someone is typing yes and no. If you're typing yes, thank you for your honesty. Yes, that's okay. And now, so this is, something that will allow your students to read something, but also to write something. Now, the idea is that students work in, let's say, groups of 6 to 8, or might be as many as 10. And the idea is that you choose, for example, the headline from the text that they have just read, or you choose one particular sentence from this text, or you just give them any sentence you want to. And this sentence is on top of everyone's piece of paper. So everyone gets a blank piece of paper with a sentence, the same sentence written on top of it. For example, this sentence could be something like, the headmaster of our school has decided to change or to convert the gym into an art gallery. So the students look at this sentence, everyone has got their own piece of paper, and they comment on it Facebook style. Okay? So, they comment on it Facebook style, they write down a comment like, I think it's a great idea, I've never liked the gym, or I think it's a silly idea, I don't like art, I prefer doing exercise. Now, when they have written the comment, they pass it on to the next person who's sitting in their group, okay? The second person will read, of course, the main sentence and the first comment. And here is where the fun begins. Because, your students can now write comments to other comments, or they can put virtual hearts, for great comment, they can put likes, wows, and all those, Facebook reactions. Now, imagine what happens when you get to, the end of the circle and the students have exchanged it 8 times. They have to read different things, from their partners. And I think the amount of interest here is quite high because, it's the Facebook mechanism. I'm going to read my friends' comments, and, this is something that always works. Best thing about it is that, it doesn't take any technology. Much as we like technology, we know that the Wi-Fi sometimes breaks at school. We know that if you don't use Wi-Fi, there will always be a student who does not have enough internet transfer because something happened. And this activity, is based on the Facebook mechanism, but does not require you to connect to Wi-Fi and wait and take all that time. Okay, so we think it's a very convenient one.
Okay, and then one more thing that we believe helps students reset is giving them lots of different challenges, different games. And, again, you don't have to work a lot to prepare a short game with a text, with reading. Once you've done a text a few times, just reading again, maybe some homework, you come to the next class with a text that, your students know, and then, you kind of black out or read out or whatever. We have, some of the vocabulary items there, then students, okay, well, let's see how much you remember, let's see how many words you can recreate, and they can work in teams, you can work in pairs, and the team that remembers most words wins most. The thing is, you recycle, you work with the same text, and again, you give your students a challenge, like a game, which is working with vocabulary. It could be working with grammar, but basically, it's lots of fun.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and once again, we're about 10 minutes into this part, so it's time for, a virtual reset, a switch into speaking. And we think that, speaking is perhaps the activity that our students would be the happiest to engage in. Problem is that sometimes they don't have the right resources.
Yeah, the thing is that students basically quite often, when they come into your class, they would like to talk, and usually in their mother language, but if you think about that, sometimes they would like to talk, but you don't know how to do it. And expecting your students to know how to make a conversation is just unrealistic at the beginning, obviously, when they are young teenagers. So they do need to be given some kind of scaffolding, some kind of help, something that will show them, hey, these are the things you have to say. This is what you can add on your own, but this is how you create a dialogue. This is why we'd like to talk about working with model dialogue for a moment. So the thing is, they come into the class, and they just take a look and they do it step by step, right? So they talk about the bus trip, then they're supposed to prepare the dialogue. They work with the model they have, and then they start speaking. But once they do it, basically stops being very challenging, stops being very interesting. So let's have a few ideas that you can have while working.
Before we go back, we'd like to go back to the previous slide for a moment. You can see that a structured speaking activity, for young teenagers is structured both in terms of the language, which you can see, in black. But, sometimes our students, when you tell them now, change the parts in blue, sometimes they say, okay, but I don't know how I should change it. Of course, with numbers, that's easy. But, what other types of tickets do you have? So that's why we have to sometimes, provide them with appropriate scaffolding, even for the content. Okay, so those things in blue are also provided in the exercise. Now, how many times do you think your students can read the same dialogue without getting bored? Yeah, we think twice would be quite optimistic, right? And 5 would be great. You've got like very patient students. So normally we read dialogues like, A, B, and then we switch roles, and basically that's over. But we know that they contain a lot of, useful functional language. So here is the first activity. You either, put on a slide with different emotions, which you can see here, or you can draw these emotions, right? So there will be like, happy or sad or angry, ecstatic, in love, etc., etc. So you can draw like, different things. And then you tell your students, okay, now you can pick an emotion for yourself and then read this dialogue with your emotion. Or if you're feeling great, you can tell your students, okay, so now you're in love and you're angry. Okay, so they have to read this dialogue with the given emotion. Now, this adds a little bit of drama to this exercise. It's like, being in the theater. It's like, practicing different things. Of course, it's always more fun, especially when the students draw emotions, for each other. Okay, and we could try that now. Okay, we've got like, we're going to give you 20 seconds. First of all, we would like you to choose an emotion for Jacek that he's going to read his part of the dialogue with.
So I'll be Emily. What kind of emotion do you want me to have? Waiting for suggestions.
In love.
Okay.
Yeah, he always
gets good one.
So let's see like a few, for a few other suggestions. Okay, so is that happy? Yeah. Okay, so Jacek is going to be the happy in love. And now can you pick an emotion for me? Surprised.
Angry. Upset.
Yeah.
Sounds like him, doesn't
in love,
it? Right?
Happy. Okay, so you know
Upset
what? I
in love.
think I'm going to try surprise because I've never tried that. Like, well, let's imagine that I'm going to be surprised to every line you read. Okay, so here we are. So Jacek is going to be Emily in love, and I'm going to be assistant who is surprised. Okay.
All right. So let's take a look. Excuse me, what time does the next bus for York leave?
At 2 o'clock?
What number is it?
Number 22?
Where does it leave from?
Bus stop number 7?
And how much does it cost?
Single or return?
Oh, return, please.
That's £8. Okay, the dialogue is over. You can react. Thank you very much. Okay, we can hear you laughing. We can hear like 348 people laughing,
Roaring with laughter.
roaring laughter. Okay, stop that because you're probably watching this from home.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to read those comments. Probably you have to explain to your family what's happening. Why you're laughing. While watching a webinar. Never done that before. Okay, then moving on.
So the thing is, it's all about having fun and making your students repeat something as many times as possible. Changing those emotions is one thing. But another thing you can try with students is asking them to read this dialogue, but with the mouth closed. And again, this might be a little bit surprising, but if you take a look at that, if a student goes like, in our language, when students speak, in Polish, we have very little intonation. So when Polish people start speaking English, they have very little intonation in English. So it's really very, very flat. So it's not like, excuse me, what time does the next bus for York leave? But usually it's like, excuse me, what time does the next bus for York leave? So to teach our students, this, we tell them, okay, now read this, but without opening your mouth. So basically you have to murmur the dialogue. And if our student goes like without any intonation, they go like, So there's no English. There's only like so we tell them wait. You have to use intonation so that the other person in your dialogue knows where to start their part, and then they understand that there is something like intonation. And when they murmur those words, they actually have to put them remember them. They have to put them in the brain, and this is where the learning is, right? So basically, if you ask your students to murmur the dialogue, the first line will go like. And the other person, sorry, just like switch to Polish. The other person goes for like, And when you have this, with your students, first of all, having fun, because they've got like 30, 15, 20 people, the number you have in a class going like, Another thing is that you really focus on the language and they really focus on the intonation. So trying that from time to time is a good thing, again, to reset your class, to move from working on the grammar and vocabulary and hitting the button with a game and saying, okay, well, we had a break, we had a joke, this is emotionally charged, it's positive, it's fun, and then we move on to something else.
You're typing those, very nice comments here. And before we click like the reset button for the last section, if your family are already wondering, what's happening to you, that you're laughing at the screen, can you now please read the first line of Emily's part? Excuse me, what time is the next bus for York leave? With your mouth closed and see your family's reaction. We're going to give you 10 seconds for that, okay? So try and murmur that part to yourself, to the screen out loud, okay? Back in 10 seconds. Okay, are they calling the police? All right, now we're moving on to the last part.
The police.
Yeah, not yet. Okay, look like a very supportive and friendly family. Perhaps they know your teachers, right? Okay, then. So we're moving on, and we have saved the most important skill, the most exciting skill for the end. What do you think it's going to be?
Actually, it's like the same two letters begin as the word great.
Yeah, it starts with GR.
Oh, we couldn't do listening, in a webinar. It would be very difficult.
Yes,
Grammar.
You're getting it right. So grammar, it's the part that most teachers love. So do you love grammar? Teaching grammar? Yes, no. Type in your comments quickly.
It's just like us.
Okay, we are grammar fans, okay? We teach grammar at the university and we think it's like the most important thing because, many times, your students will ask you questions about vocabulary that you don't know, and it's natural because there are many words you don't know even in Polish. So your students will always know some words in English that you don't. But grammar gives you the power because anytime a student asks you a question about an unknown word, you can always ask them a question about grammar, like, do you know how to form the third conditional in reported speech? Okay, so grammar is, the teacher's weapon for everything. And we're going to show you a few ways to get your students, a bit more excited about teaching grammar than they usually happen to be.
All right, so let's begin. Whenever you work with the grammar, whenever you give your students a chance to practice grammar, you have to make sure that your students, not only just use the rules, but they use them with some kind of different kinds of exercises. And
you can start with something very basic because I think most of your students, especially at the elementary levels, will tend to create very short sentences. And, it's okay when they're beginners, but they have to move on. So sometimes, when they create sentences like that, I rode a bike to the forest last weekend, I drove a car to the airport on Monday, etc. We tell them now, the challenge is that you have to work in groups and think of adding one word, to each sentence. So this could be something like, I drove a car quickly, okay? Or, you can tell your students, the challenge is extended, they have to add 2 words or 3 words and so on. And doing this, we slowly make them used to the fact that they have to extend their discourse because, in real life, if you answer with very short sentences, this shows lack of interest. In examinations,
this means like failing.
Yeah, this means failing or getting a lower grade. So you always have to extend until it becomes, natural. And whatever we're showing you, we're using past simple examples, but all those exercises can be adapted to any grammatical structure. Okay.
Okay. Another idea you can use in your classes is having 4 different pieces of paper. Don't have if you want you can laminate them, but laminating is using plastic and plastic is bad. But the thing is that you can use like those conjunctions. You can use linkers like and, so, because, and but. You write them on 4 separate pieces of paper, and whenever your student uses a sentence which is short, which has only one thought, you tell them, you just put one of those words up, and then you make your student continue. So I rode the bike to the forest last weekend. They stop, you put the word and up, and I had lots of fun. Or, I rode a bike to the forest last weekend because I wanted to pick some mushrooms, and what have you. But the thing is that you make your students realize that they have to continue. They can't just finish after one thought in a sentence. And the funny thing is, as you will see, that whenever your students, after some time, whenever they use a short sentence, and you start reaching for a piece of paper with one of those linkers, they will automatically finish the sentence in the way they want it, because oh yeah, I remember, or I have to use my own linker, because if I don't, the teacher may use a linker that I don't really know how to continue with. So basically, it's just a very simple trick, that you use every day in every class, but you make your students develop and make something much longer.
Yeah, the next one, next activity is connected with making questions or asking questions, because we find, at least in Polish, that many students, when they want to ask questions in English, they just use an affirmative sentence with rising intonation at the end. Does the same thing happen in Ukrainian, that you can ask a question just by changing the intonation? And your students will sometimes forget words like do or did or have or has. Yeah, so we see, that's why we have split the idea of a dialogue. How many people does it usually take to have a dialogue? So we have broken this up into 4. So 4 students working together. 2 students are like one side of the dialogue, like one person. And the point is that, they have to work with the other part of students in the following way. Each person in the pair can only say one word at the time. Okay, so we're going to start with something like this. What would you like to do after this session? And then at this moment, it's the other pair's turn to answer in the same way. Okay, do you understand that?
So like we would become another pair, and there's like one person said like, I would like to watch
some
more sessions
with
Jacek
and
Czeslaw.
Of course. Okay, so you see, this is how it works. And now the problem is, well, the challenge here is that, of course, it's not an idea for fluency. It's an idea for accuracy, but, this slows down the process of your students, saying something quickly. The idea is that, they will have to think about each word very carefully. So that's the place where you have to think about auxiliaries. And if you forget the auxiliary, perhaps your partner from the pair will remind you, okay, it's not what you would like to do, but what would you like to do, etc. Okay, so you focus on articles, prepositions, and all those, small, tiny words that are grammatical, very important. And, well, they will decide whether you get, a higher or lower grade in an exam, or whether you communicate effectively.
Okay, then one more idea. Sorry, 2 more ideas. One I'd like to talk about is like something called speed dating. I don't know if you're familiar with this. It's like, it was created in, I think, New York for people who are really busy. And, when you go on a date, you find someone you talk to for like 2 or 3 hours. You, like, after 10 minutes of the date, you realize that this is not your perfect match, or basically a joke. And, want to get rid of this person. And, but you have to be there for some time. You have to, spend some time, like pretending that everything is fine, and then you disappear. So, instead of that, they had like those speed dates when you like lines of people as in the picture, they meet each other, they talk to each other for like 15 minutes. And at the end of the night, and after 15 minutes, they switch the partner they talk to. It's like 15 minutes of talking, 15 minutes of talking. And at the end of the night, if you like someone, you give the organizer of the whole event, like the number of the person you like. If they picked you as well, then, you are sent mobile phone numbers and you can have like a real date. Of course, we're not suggesting that, in your classes, okay. But what you can do is like to tell your students, to sit like that, they sit with like facing 5 students, in different groups. And then you ask them to talk about something. You can give them questions, as you can see here, to give them some kind of scaffolding, to lead them through the conversation. And they have to talk for a minute or maybe 2 minutes. A minute is okay, but if you want to go into minutes, it's fine as well. So you go, where did you go on holiday? How did you get there? Who did you go with? And then they talk for a minute. And after 1 minute, you say change. And one group of people stand up and they move to one side, like to the left, one chair. Then they sit down and they talk to another person, like this is a new person they're sitting in front of, for another minute, answering the same questions. The good thing here is that this is a kind of drill. They repeat the same structures, and they will notice that the second time and the third and the fourth time they talk about the same thing, they speak much quicker. So we tell the students, you can't stop talking. You have to talk for like 60 seconds, which basically means that they will have to develop what they're saying. So they will rehearse 4 times the things from the very beginning, but they will also add and develop whatever they were supposed to add and develop. So this way, your students have a nice kind of practice. They talk to, they become comfortable with what they're talking about. They have a chance to talk to new people. Obviously, at the same time, the other people listening to them, they may be a little bit passive. So you tell your students, like, at the end of the class, I'll ask you, to tell me what you heard. Or I'll ask you, to tell another person in your class, what you heard and what the most interesting thing was. So this is how you can, have this very quick. Just like if you think about this, like 1 minute of speaking, 5 people, 5 changes, about 7 minutes. 7 minutes of very intensive speaking, guided, but still lots of fun.
Yeah, and the last activity before we take a short break is based on the idea of the fact that students want to know about your personal life. And if you ever thought that your students don't care about you because they have this kind of manner that's kind of I don't know, I don't care, it's not true. Your students will watch your Instagram profile, your Facebook profile, so please be careful what kind of content you post. But at the same time, because they want to know about us, we can give them the content that might be interesting, and that's also connected with the type of language. Okay, so it's called like truths and lies. It may be truths only, lies only. So you write 5 sentences about yourself and tell them, okay, now some of them are true, some of them are false. Now, as we said before, this can work with any structure: present simple, second conditional, past simple, anything. So we've got 5 examples for you. But because there are 2 of us, we have changed the rules a bit. So these sentences are true for one of us or both of us. So can you now tell us your votes? So type in C for Czeslaw, that's me, and J for Jacek. Okay? I played the rock guitar in a rock band between 1991 and 1993. Thanks.
Oh, come on, you're just telling people, I was the lead singer in that band. I mean, sorry, the lead screamer.
The lead screamer.
In that
okay,
band.
We're moving on to the next question. I was in prison in 2008.
Which of us looks more like a prisoner? Bold, no glasses.
Nobody. Interesting. Okay, then. So I ran, we're moving on to the third question. I ran a marathon in 2013.
Both.
That's sweet.
Thank you. I mean, the number of C's really hurts, and I don't look good enough to run a marathon.
You do. Okay. Next, I was a calendar model in 2016.
Thank you.
I think it's still about the marathon because you asked questions.
No. Okay. It's a calendar model. Thank you very much for all the J's.
Okay. Thank you. Something is going on. I think it's C, not J. Okay. And the last one is I wore ladies' underwear yesterday. Okay, so before we finish this session, we'd like to tell you that all of these sentences are true about at least one of us. Maybe not yesterday.
I have no knowledge.
Okay, and at this time, we won't tell you the details, but we hope that we have managed to show you what the point is. You try to reset every 10 minutes. You have to work with different issues, your students' attention span, their memory problems, etc., etc. But I think if you reset every 10 minutes, things do become a bit more digestible.
And then we don't know about you, but we felt like this hour was like 15 minutes.
Yeah, it was quick.
That was before
quick.
all the resets we had with you.
Okay, so now Irina will take over, and we'll be back in 5 minutes. So please stay with us. If you enjoyed the session, the next one is even better.
No, it's also fun too.
No, it's just good. Okay, so we'll see you in 5 minutes.
Okay. I'll wait. Turning on my camera. Right. Thank you very much, Jacek and Czeslaw, for your amazing session. I think everyone enjoyed greatly. And before the guys are coming back with the next session, don't miss it. We have a 5-minute break. So if you were waiting for a break to take a cup of tea or coffee, here's your chance to go to the kitchen and grab it. Or you needed some time. Czeslaw and Jacek wanted me to give them 5 minutes. And when I asked them, what should I do? They said, just keep on joking. Okay, well, I'm going to use these 5 minutes a little bit more useful. The course book that they were referred to, All Clear for Ukraine, is the newest title by Macmillan. So if you don't know about it yet, here is the time for you to learn. Here is how it looks. You can see that it's all brand new. Released on the 11th of May, approved for our schools. And if you are still thinking about the choice of the course book for your 5th graders, here is your perfect choice. I could see in the chat that some of you teach large classes, some of you as large as 28, 30 people. In this case, this is a perfect book for you because it is based on a mixed stability group approach. So you could work with all the group together on different levels. And I would also like to say that if your students are not used to books of British publishers, and you know that it might be a problem in Ukraine when they are introduced to British books for the first time, in that case, this is your perfect choice because not only it has a word list with translation into Ukrainian, but also something all parents are constantly worried about. Ta-da! Here goes the grammar reference. And grammar reference is also in Ukrainian, which is quite helpful in case they missed the class. Also, each student book has access to online exercises, which are not the same as in the workbook. So your students have a chance for extra practice at home. I'm not sure if Czeslaw and Jacek are ready to get back. So a couple of words about the next session. As you can see, they are brilliant, right? The second session is going to be dedicated to lesson planning and the importance of challenge for your students. So let's see if they're ready to get back. Czeslaw, Jacek, are you with us? Yeah? Oh, thank you for your attention. Are you ready? No? Okay, I guess they need some more time to change. Aha, here they are. I'm so happy to see you.
Okay, can you please reload the presentation?
Wait a sec. Okay, stand by. Right. Okay. While we are working, on that issue.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so while we are still waiting, I'd like to add that this year All Clear is for the 5th grade only. We are expecting the book for this grade 6 in somewhere in end of October, beginning of November. So if you choose this course book for your school year, you can be sure that by next year you will have something to work with. And the course for Ukraine is going to have 3 levels for the 5th, the 6th, and the 7th grade. And the next session is going to be based on our old friend Gateway. This is the 2nd edition. I'm sure all of your teachers know this course book really well. And no, still working.
Okay, so have you got the presentation?
Oh, no.
We can still see the previous one.
Okay. Yeah, me too. This is what I see. Okay.
Okay.
We'll have to very quickly get in touch with our technical help.
Wait a sec. Right. So again, while we are waiting for technical help, several words about Ukrainian state exam. As you know, students starting from year 2021 are going to have an obligatory state exam in English. So, or you have to make sure that all of your students reach level B1 by the end of 11th grade. And Gateway is a perfect way to prepare for that. So, guys, are you ready?
Yes, and the presentation is ready.
Okay, so back to you then.
Okay, so we can see that the number of people is still the same or rising, which means that, you know, either you have enjoyed the first session or you have fallen asleep. So now in the first session, you know, we asked you to tell us whether you can whether you had a second window with Facebook open, or whether you're checking, you know, Facebook on your mobile phones. Are you doing this right now? Now, yes. Okay, so here is a place where you can go to see it. Well, to see us, you know, trying the session with you, and that's where you can post your comments that we will definitely read later. But now we won't be responding to them. Okay, so if you have anything as pleasant as you said in the first session to say, that's the place. Okay, and let's begin. Now we're going to show you a few questions, and we would like you to reflect on the answers without telling us any of the answers just yet. Okay. So please take, you know, a quiet minute to read those questions and, you know, think about the answers.
You just don't have to do the last one.
Could. Again. Okay, so you know, we're not going to answer these questions right now. The answers will appear, you know, towards, well, like throughout this session, and at the end, we're going to ask those questions again, and then we'll see. Well, we'll look at the answers and we'll talk about the answers together. Okay, so let's get started.
Yeah, so we would like to show you what we believe is like a good plan, like good lesson plan, and how a lesson plan should be looked at, and how you should plan your lessons, how we believe it works. Now we have like 5 ideas that may actually help you, you know, 5 pictures that represent what we were going to talk about. And if you take a look at this first picture in the left top corner, you will see that this is like 2 people like doing something, and I suppose that yeah, you already know that these people are warming up. So then the next stage of the class, we believe, is like the stage you can see with a ring, and it's a kind of special ring.
Yeah. So what do you call this ring?
Okay. Yes, you're right. I heard one of the answers. This is an engagement ring. So yes, we will be talking about engaging. Obviously not in this way, but your students in the class. Then in the middle, you have a very excited young man who does one of the most important things in the class, that is studying. Yes, he's studying, and we'll talk about studying, how we believe it should be conducted as well. After that, we have, well, a picture which we just we looked and looked on the internet and looked, and we couldn't find a perfect picture, but what we're showing here is like activation. It's about activating the way you learn, or activating what you've just learned, what you've just studied. And finally, if this first picture was warm up, then the last picture is going to be absolutely, you're right. There's this lady in Odessa who gave us the answer. Yes, cool down. So yes, this is the cool down. So this is the way we believe a perfect lesson should look. Mm-hmm. And if you take a look at that, you'll see that you have warm up and cool down, but in the middle you have engagement, study, and activation. So you have to engage, study, and activate your students. And lots of books, lots of for teachers say that probably you have to create your lesson along the plan, like presentation, practice, production. We believe that although it's not a bad idea to have a class like that, it's probably a little bit more effective if you go with engage, study, and activate. Because if you think about presentation, practice, production, it's the teacher who presents things to the students. So the teacher is active, and students who are not active, what they are like. They are kind of bored. They get out of just the chairs. They stop listening. Then when you say practice, when you tell your students practice now, they don't always know the material they're supposed to practice, that it hasn't been presented. So, practicing is very, very passive. And finally, it's production, which we believe is a little bit sometimes unrealistic. If your students don't know the material well enough, they will not produce anything that's sensible. Instead, we believe that as teachers, after this warm-up and at the beginning of the class, we should try and work at making this lesson as student-oriented as possible. We believe that we need to engage our students in what's happening. Then we have to give our students a chance to study. Not we present, but study. And then finally, we need to help them activate the knowledge they've just studied. So it's not about producing only, it's activating whatever there's in their heads. So that's the way we believe a lesson should be planned. And we'll try to show that why this way in a moment.
Yeah, and at the same time, we'd like to tell you that, a lesson has to be composed of many small challenges that we give our students. Because, there's this tendency that, we should make things easier to our students, that, we have like half a century experience, right? Like 50 years of experience together. And we think that making things easier, does not work. Things have to be made a bit more difficult. Why? First of all, because challenge is a part of life. Okay, and we're going to give you a little bit of a challenge, okay? And we're going to ask you to type in what kind of challenges are represented by these photographs. So beginning from the
left top corner.
Top left-hand corner, okay? What's the challenge here?
The one with the Iron Man.
Okay, can you please type in the answers? Okay, so of course it's connected with sports. Now, what do you think is the challenge in the middle?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, the challenge in the middle.
Challenge for a lot of people.
Yes, it's a challenge.
Yes,
driving. Well, I was in Kiev a few months ago, and in the center of Kiev, I was just so happy to be using public transport because life was not that easy. Okay, and the next one, top right-hand corner.
Scrambled eggs.
Scrambled eggs.
So big challenge.
Yeah, cooking. What happens, when one of the parents goes away.
Eating is not a challenge, I would say.
To you.
Okay.
Anyway, okay, the one in the bottom left-hand corner. Okay, the man and the woman.
We believe that this is relationships. We believe this is a great picture for relationships. Because in male-female relationships, we try to figure things out. We try to get Well, if you take a look at the pictures, you will see what we actually try to get.
Yes. Okay. And the last one, this longest picture, what do you think is a challenge represented here? Yes. Perfect. It's bringing up, and I think those of us who are parents know that it's a challenge. It begins with teaching our kids to walk, then just a few months later is teaching them like not to walk, to stand still, to sit still, not to talk. Then we teach them to talk, then we teach them not to talk, etc. Okay, so this is a challenge. It's called real life. Thank you very much.
So life is full of challenges, and this is why we believe that our students should be faced with challenges. But that's not the only reason. Yeah,
the reason is that from a methodological point of view, introducing difficulties is helpful. Okay, so there's solid scientific research that says that introducing difficulties into the learning process can improve long-term retention of the learned material, which means that if your students, for example, have to deal with challenges while they're learning, they will remember what they're learning better and for a longer time. For example, what happens when you talk to your students and your students can't hear you very well? Do you speak up or do you speak more quietly? That's a very good point. It depends. Yes. So for a long time, we just spoke up, but then we realized that sometimes it may be a better idea to speak more quietly, because this way you try and protect your voice, save your voice, and at the same time your students have to make an effort, right? Because in real life, when there's noise in the streets, when someone is speaking unclearly, etc., they have to deal with that. Okay. Then the next thing is that sometimes when we do pair work, we put the pairs a bit away from each other. So it's like they're not standing next to each other, but for example 1 meter away, and there will be like, for example, 5 different pairs of people standing next to each other. So you have to speak to someone who is about 1 meter away from you, while 10 other people are speaking at the same time. Of course, you can't tell them to stop speaking, because that's real life. When you're on the subway, when you're on the bus, you don't tell other people, to stop speaking just because you can't hear the other person. Okay?
Another thing is that our brain is created in such a way that whatever is the same, whatever is easy, is like boring, and you don't really focus on that. It's those little things that are difficult to notice that we start paying attention to, because we have to check what they are. For example, do you have like clear handwriting as teachers? Because my handwriting is awful. It's terrible. Whenever I write something, it's not a joke, it's actually true. I sometimes have problems, just I have to think for a moment what I've just written. And for a long time I felt guilty about that. And then, I read this and I realized that, when you write a word and your students go like, but teacher, is it an A or an O? This is the moment when they have to think about the actual letters. If you want your students to remember something really, really well, if you write this in very small letters and they have, I can't see, and some of them, can I please get closer to the board to read it? And say, yes. This is the moment when they actually focus on the important thing. If you give your students notes and they're all in very clear, like the easiest font, all of them the same way, basically nothing stands out and the important things disappear. However, if you make something smaller, something bigger, your students will have to focus on the small ones. And that's the idea. These are those little difficulties that we believe you should introduce into your teaching to your students to understand.
And if they have to, for example, leave their seats and come to the board, make an effort to see that word and write it down, that's when they're learning. Okay, so we think about 3 major types of challenges that we give our students.
These are, first, if you take a look at the clock, these are time challenges. If you take a look at the brain, these are intellectual challenges. And then finally, colors and everything, well, these are creative challenges. All the challenges we believe our students should get.
Yeah, so we start with warm-ups. And, when we were at school, the most common warm-up was, the teacher asking 2 or 3 students to come to the front of the class. And basically, the teacher asked them questions about the previous lessons material. That was very stressful. It was stressful for those individuals. It was stressful for everybody else. It was definitely warming up. Okay, but we think that the point of a warm-up, in the language classroom, is to transfer our students from the different worlds they come from. And now, of course, when your students come to class, you can see their bodies, but their minds may be anywhere else, because, two students might be thinking about the message they have just read from their parents. Another student might be thinking about, a possible fight that he had yesterday with his, friend or ex-friend or whatever else. Okay, so the point is to try and bring everybody into the same place in terms of their minds, right? Then, sometimes the point of a warm-up might be to recall what your students already know, or to prepare them for what's going to happen. And we're going to show you a few ideas for how to do that.
Yeah, so one of the first things we'd like to talk about is something we've already mentioned, that is, working with the vocabulary in lots of different ways, again, giving challenges, deciding how to use words. The first thing you do is like categorizing. We talked about that in the first session, so I'm not going to talk about this too much right now, but then, a few tricks that we use in our classes. First of all, when you ask your students to make a list of words, like categories of different kind, you should, I suppose, tell them you should give them some limits, because if you don't say, like, I want you right now to write words, 20 words, 15 words, you'll have those students who will write and write and write and say, okay, let's move on slide, but I haven't finished, I still know some words. So first thing, you say, I would like you to write 10 words for this category, 5 words for this category, because it's a challenge. Then you have to, limit what you have. And then you can give your students a time limit. You tell them, okay, you have to divide these into different categories, or you have to make those, you have to add your own words, but you just get only 1 minute. And obviously, when you do that with your teenage students, the first time you tell them you have only 1 minute, usually after 1 minute, some of them are still looking for the pen, some of them are still thinking about looking for the pen, and some of them have already finished this exercise. Well, fine, good. The next time you do it, and you give them only 1 minute, they will know that they have to hurry up. They have to get organized in a way. Another thing you can do with your students, you can tell them, you know what, you make those lists, you make those categories, and then we'll check. And the students or the group, the pairs who work together, who have the longest list of words, but words that other students don't have, win. So this way, you make your students focus on the vocabulary. You make your students think about like more complex words. It's not just like those words you can see here on the page, but any other words you may know from some other sources. We also like to suggest a bit of a game connected with the vocabulary, and it's something which is a bit of a warm-up, but can help you while working. We call it ambidextrous pen. I hope you remember the word ambidextrous from the last session. Like using both words skillfully well. And the idea is it works like that. So I have a piece of paper somewhere here. Okay, so here's a piece of paper, as you can see, and here's a pen. And now the idea is that whenever you, if you have a pen and a piece of paper, get ready, because I'll try this with you in a moment. So, you tell your students that in a moment you're going to spell a word, and they have to write all the letters you spell. But the thing is that, if students just write letters down, they don't really usually focus on separate words, separate letters. We want to slow them down. How do you do that? Well, you tell your students to write the letters you're going to spell to them, but every letter has to be written with like the other hand, like every other hand, just like alternately. So the thing is that if you spell the first letter, they have to write this with the dominant hand. So in my case, it's the right one. And then for the next letter, they have to switch the hand and they have to use the left one, and then the right one, and then the left one. This way, when, and are you ready? Have you got your pens? Have you got your piece of paper? Yes? No? Maybe? Yes. Okay. So this way, I'm going to like spell one of the words you have on the slide to you, and you just remember the first word in the right hand, the first letter in the right hand, then left hand, right hand. Okay, so you ready? S, change the hand. T, change the hand. R, change the hand. A, change the hand. I, change the hand. G, change the hand. H, change the hand. And T, change the hand. The word obviously is straight. Yes, thank you very much. But the idea that we wanted to give is like, you slow things down, and those students will basically, have to do it with different hands, one after another. This way, they will they will probably get more focus on separate letters. And then one final idea, it's like something which we call 1 minute thieving or stealing time. It's when you tell your students, okay, after a class, after different words have been written in the notebooks or from the previous class, because this is the beginning, this is the warm-up, right? So you tell them, okay, open your notebooks to the previous class, and now you walk around and you try to remember as many words from your friends' notebooks as possible. And after that, after a minute, you sit down and you write a list of words. The student with the longest list of words wins. So this way, we have some kind of warm-up and working with vocabulary.
When you present vocabulary, like in a new set, you can try something like this. It's called Wordle, okay? And we're going to put the website for you. The idea is that, when you prepare for your students, you type in, again, 10 to 12 target vocabulary items, and Wordle will generate this list. Well, the idea is, of course, that it doesn't look like a list. It looks like a bit of a challenge, because as you can see, some words are smaller, some are bigger, etc., etc. And the idea is that you can tell your students, now you have a minute, you have to write down all the words in your notebook, and of course they will say, I can't see all of them, and you say politely, this isn't my problem. They have to run to the board, to see those words, and they have to run back to their seats, to their places, write everything down. And the idea is that Wordle gives you many possibilities of arranging those words. If you don't like this layout, you just click next, and then at the end, when you find the one you like, you just click save to JPEG, and this is how it works. Okay, so it's quick and effective and can look different every time. Okay,
all right. Now the next thing that we have to do after the warm-up is is engage the student in the class. And engagement is very important. If your students are like disengaged in the class, they will probably look at you, or not even look at you, not listen. But we want our students to be part of the class, and we can do that doing basic two things. One, creating some interest before we start studying, and that's the important stage. And to create something like to tell your students you don't know something, just like you don't know how to do something this way.
Yeah, so, as teachers, we have many goals in coming to class. So one lesson will teach, for example, writing a formal letter, and next lesson we teach the language of advice. Then we teach, for example, listening for specific information. We have a different goal every lesson. What do you think is your students' main goal in coming to class? Can you please type that in? What is your students' main goal in coming to class?
Well, you have wonderful students.
Yeah, we have wonderful students. I think we agree with these, but we also think that sometimes the main reason is to survive. Would you agree? Yeah, I guess this is also our
yeah, the parents told them.
Yeah, exactly. So that's why they need to survive, and sometimes honestly it's also our goal. We need to survive, and well, we think that perhaps telling them, engaging them is a reason or is a way to make them survive. And we think that this stage of the lesson is a little bit like a big headline, okay? And I'm sure that, all countries have those tabloid newspapers. Do you have those tabloids in Ukraine, with celebrity gossip and, different kinds of scandals and, sometimes, fake news and everything. Do you have that in your country as well? Yes, no question. Yes, no. Okay, yeah. So we think that, it's like this stage of the lesson is like the headline, okay? And if you were walking to work and, if you saw something like this, who wouldn't stop to read a headline like this, okay? Or perhaps, a headline like that, okay? I think it will never happen to us, okay? So we think, as Jacek said before, that, it's a stage of a lesson when you signal that there is something your students don't know, both in terms of language or in terms of subject.
So you can actually start with asking them a question. Can you please tell me about your dream? If you're introducing the class on the second conditional, Or, can you please tell me, because the weather may change, next week, so tell me about your two different options. And if they say, but I don't know how to say that if something happens, well, that's what we're going to talk about. If you want to tell me about like your plans for the next year, it's like, but how do we say that in English? How we use the future? Well, that's the way to show them this need, and this is what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, so that's creating this, showing this kind of gap between the language they don't have yet and the language they will learn. But also, it may be about this cognitive gap, and you ask them questions about the topic. Like you may ask them about the height of the Eiffel Tower, if this answer will appear in the lesson. So of course most of them will say they don't know, and that's how you engage them, because later on during the lesson you will show them the answers. Okay, so it's like creating a need and showing your student that there is something they don't know, but at the same time this is something that they will learn in today's lesson.
Absolutely. So once you do that, once you've created this engagement, this interest, you move on to this study. And we would like to stress something really, really strongly. Study is when your students think about the language, when they work the rules out, not when we give them. Obviously, we feel much more comfortable giving all the rules, and we feel we know the rules, we know the language, we know what to give them. But the thing is, students, if they don't work on their own, they become disengaged. I mean, whenever I tell my students, now we're going to do some grammar, I can see how they drift off. There are students it's like magic. If you want your students to fall asleep, yeah, drifting off. I said the word grammar and he's off. Just like if you want your students to fall asleep, you just go say grammar, and they fall asleep. Why? Because they're passive. They know that we don't have to focus on anything. So we believe, let's change it. Give them clear examples so that they can come to clear conclusions. Don't give them anything more complex, but ask them to think, ask them to propose. Obviously, some of the answers will be incorrect, but we have the book and we have something we're working with to help us. So let's take a look at the way you begin. So the first thing you do is you basically tell your students, take a look at the language in blue. And if you know what the language in blue is, then you work with the exercise.
Yeah, so, if you're afraid, for example, if you're afraid that, your students will not understand or will not get the language, we think that we have to use very clear examples. And, the course books that we use always have very clear examples of the language. So it's really difficult for the student to get something wrong. And we know, because we've seen this in the classroom, that, this inductive approach where you start with examples and your students work out the rules really works. Of course, it's more time consuming because your students have to make the effort, and, the sort of weight, the responsibility is not on you, it's on your students. And, the model of teaching where the student, where the teacher provides knowledge, we know it's no longer necessary because they got the internet. Okay, so they have to work out the rules. And if, by any chance, you're not sure whether they got it right, you can check the rules with them. They can go back to the language reference section at the back of the book and just verify. But one thing is important about the study stage. In life, studying takes like 12 to 17 years. During the lesson, this is the shortest stage. So we minimize, this time spent on talking about English to maximize the time spent speaking the actual English language later on in the next part of the lesson.
I'd like to make a reference to one of the comments repeated, but most of our students can't study rules on their own. We're not saying giving them rules. What we're saying is giving them examples. As you can see here, you have sentences with the grammar in blue, and then you ask them to think for a moment. I agree, it's not a very easy process. It's not like, they just, I know that, I can do it on my own. But, students and human brains are created in a way in which we start to think and we look for possibilities to think and we look for patterns. If they're given clear patterns and if they are taught to think this way, sooner or later, they will start looking for those rules for themselves, and it's going to work.
Yes, one more thing about the language use here. Your students can use their native language to talk about the rules, because, I've tried this with students who are much younger than, 18, with people who are 14 and 15. And if they speak Polish during this part of the lesson, if they come up with the rules, come up with their ideas, that's where the learning happens, okay? That's when they start thinking and, they arrive at the right conclusions.
Okay, but as Czeslaw said, studying should be short. So now we're moving on to activation and activating. And, this is a very important stage because, just getting the rules, is not like knowing English. We know that learning a language is not like learning, let's say, biology. You get a fact, you remember a fact, you know it. Like learning a language is more like learning a sport, for example. Somebody tells you how to do things, or you work things out for yourself, and then you have to practice them. And this is what the activation stage is about. And here again, we believe that you need to do things in a certain order, so that you don't lose your students on the way. So first you start with mechanical and communicative drills. I know that there are some teachers who are afraid of these. They say, no, mechanical drills, just like, because it's not about communication. Well, this is the beginning. There are some teachers, who say, no, it's only about mechanical drills, give them lots of exercise like that. Again, it's not the whole thing. This is the beginning, but you have to move on later on. So first you start working with mechanical stuff, and then you move on. So let's just take a look at a few exercises of a few pictures of how you can work things out. So the first thing is that you take a look, and these exercises you have like very simple exercise, very controlled. Students look at the grammar, they look at the words, they put them, and this is how they move on. They don't have to spend a lot of time working things out. They've just learned the rules and they work with the rules.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now the next question. Of course, when we practice questions, we do something like yes/no questions, and we like to show you an activity that is called yes questions. So when your students have got this new structure, and the point is that they have to work in pairs and they have to prepare questions for each other that they know their partner's answer would be yes. Okay, so of course it's based on the idea that they need to know their partners, and I think at this level your students will have been in the same class for some time, and knowing this person, they can actually ask questions. The point is, of course, to try and be creative, make a bit of an effort. And once again, all these questions that you can see on the slide can be answered yes by one of us or both of us.
Yeah, that's another thing. Just to talk about working in pairs. I know, but you can do that like your students can ask you. The same questions, yes, no questions. They may know you. I suppose they know you. So we talk about ourselves all the time. We're so interesting. They have to learn about us. So it's very easy for them to ask such questions to us.
Okay, so a quick question. So we type C or J once again. Do you ever take a nap in your classroom? Is that me or is it Jacek?
Who's going to say yes?
Oh. Yeah. Okay, the next one is, do you like vareniki? Well, the answer is, who doesn't? We find, a lot of similar types of food between our countries. It's just the names that are different and slightly,
So what's the Polish name for vareniki?
Gołąbki.
So we call them gołąbki.
Okay then. The next one is, do you close your eyes when you sneeze? Is it me or is it Jacek? Yeah, it's both. We're humans, right? All humans do it. Next question.
So, does your best friend need to change his hairdo? I mean, if you take a look here, you will see it's not her do, but her don't.
Or her doesn't.
Or even her doesn't. Yeah, sometimes.
Okay, then. No, it's excellent. I mean, the hair, thank you. Thank you. I like that too. Okay, the next one. Do you think you're handsome? Do you think you're handsome? The question is not, are you handsome? The question is, do you think you're handsome?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you see, this could be, this could be like treated as this simple yes/no question again, but the point is it's only yes questions. So the students have to make an effort to think about, be a bit creative. This is the creative challenge.
But
we were talking about.
But at the same time, as you can see, it's the same structure again and again and again. So it's actually a drill. It's fun and and developing.
Yeah. Okay. We're moving on.
Okay. So the next thing is, once they've worked, with the structure on the level of a word, they have to move on to something like text level, because this is our experience. That and it doesn't matter. Teenagers, university students, we teach different age groups, but if you work with your students, on the sentence level, they will give you all the correct answers. They know the structure, and then suddenly you give them a text and they get lost. They don't remember what comes where. So again, you have to give them some kind of practice which is based in a text.
Yeah, but again, we use this powerful mechanism that your students are interested in you. So once again, we sort of disclose some of the information about our lives, and this is, what we what we do with our students as well. Okay, so we show them a text. Well, actually, because of the nature of the webinar, we have to do it in a bit of a different way. The way we do it in the classroom is that the students don't see this text. You just read it out to them, and you pause at those different moments. Okay, so they have to complete the next word. Or if you really want, to show them the whole text, they can take a look at that and complete the correct words. But you tell them this text is about my life. Okay, and of course this text is also a model, because you will see that this whole text is about the present simple. So you give this text as a model. If you want to, you can tweak this by, for example, including one fact that's not true, and then you have to, well, you tell your students, now tell me which part of this is not true. And then, of course, they move on to creating their own text based on their own life. Given a model like this, they're very likely to create, something that's quite accurate and very good quality.
So yes, when you take a look at just the students, you give them the beginning, for example, you can see here, and then they have to create something. They have to. So as you can see, we're moving from a mechanical practice to working with a sentence, to working with a text, and then to being creative themselves, right? But still focused on our students developing in a slow but sure manner. It's like we know we're moving to the next and the next thing. As Czeslaw has suggested, basically, if you ask your students to write sentences about themselves, they basically know a lot about each other. So what you can say, like from time to time, you can put 1 or 2 or 3 sentences which are not enough. Sorry, which are not true. I just read the word enough. And when they get the sentence which are not true, they have to discuss why they think they are not true. Another thing is you can ask your students, not to write those sentences about themselves, but they take a look at the friend they're sitting with, and they finish those sentences as if they were the friend. And then the friend decides, yes, this is true, this is, you know me, maybe you don't know me. Okay? And then finally, you take a look at these. And here, you have to ask questions, and you can write the answers to those questions. So like, what will you do if you don't have any homework this weekend? You just you pick 2 or 3 people, you write their names on a piece of paper, and you write their answers. And then you walk around the classroom and you ask the people, and you see if your answers match. Right, so again, we use the same question we have created, but in a drill. And at the same time, we go around and we check if we were right. So it's not just like writing sentences, but actually looking for real communication. Even if those answers are like kind of jokes, your students will still want to use the language, and that's what we're basically looking for.
Yeah, and this last thing about the activation is that sometimes the activation stage of new language may happen through teaching life skills. And I don't know why, but many of my students that I teach methodology at the university say that, do we really have time to teach life skills like, confidence or how to give a presentation, etc.? And I think it's yes, because, this is the place where you can use language actively, and at the same time, teach something bigger than just, teaching English. When you think about most of your teenage students that you teach, would you say that their self-esteem and their confidence is generally too high or too low? Yeah, I think the same thing is happening, with the teenagers in Poland. A large majority have problems with self-esteem and confidence and so on. And now, with all respect to grammar, we love grammar,
the best,
and everything that, but it's not usually the grammar lesson that our students will remember from lessons. So, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, those life skill lessons, like, lessons on well-being, lessons on how to give a presentation, may be the most memorable lessons as well. And at the same time, they're always structured in such a way that they will practice, the language that you have been learning in the whole unit. Okay, and now it's time for the last stage of the lesson.
We hope you remember that the last stage was the cool down stage. Yes, so you've worked, you've explained things, you have practiced, and now we're moving on to something like cool them down, give them a chance to revise and consolidate the new material. That's one thing. Another thing is that basically we have a chance to leave our students with the feeling that they've learned something in our class. Lots of students come to school, come to the classes, and leave their classes without really realizing that they have learned. It doesn't mean that they haven't, but they don't realize that. And you know, if you give your students this cool down stage, could be like the only teacher at school that actually teaches, because the students will be leaving your class thinking, oh, so these are the words I learned today. This is the grammar I learned today. This is the function. This is what I learned to express today. So it's not a bad idea, you know, to have this cool down at the end.
It's actually like, you know, a nice idea, you know, when they come home and their parents ask them, how was school? Or what did you learn at school today? You know, most students will say something like nothing. But, you know, when the parents ask about English, your students will remember the last thing you told them, right? This cool down. And they say, well, physics, nothing. Biology, nothing. Chemistry, nothing. English, yeah, I learned this new thing about the present simple. Okay, and this is how it works.
So the first idea I would like to suggest is something which is called hidden treasure. The thing is that it could be you, the teacher, but we'd like to suggest something like a friend, you know. So basically, they exchange notebooks at the end of the class, and you tell them, now, okay, take your friend's notebook and hide somewhere, not at the like last page they've written, but somewhere in the notebook, at the beginning, in the middle, upside down, different colors, different font. Remember, you know, it has to be something that's difficult to read, difficult to find, something that's, you know, unusual. Somewhere in the notebook, three most important words from the class, or a sentence that's important, or three difficult words from the class. And then just like they close it, and then you tell students you're not allowed to open your notebook until you've left the class. So it's after giving the homework. So the point is, you know, that once, you know, you get those three words from a student that's sitting next to you, or a student from a different desk, you know, because a teacher can go and you can give those notebooks at random, you know, they will most likely leave the classroom, open the notebooks and look for the words. And if there's a words they don't know, they'll probably go to the friend and say, like, what's this word? And where did you put it? You know, so you have people thinking about the three most important, the most interesting words, and you have people looking for these words. And they will go over the notebooks. And if you do this like 3 or 4 or 5 times a semester, the students will have like those strange words somewhere in the middle of a page, you know, written on it on the margin, written upside down, that will stand out. So whenever your students go over like the notebook, they will see those difficult words. Because remember, these are the most difficult words, the most interesting words in the class. So, and they will revise them several times over one semester. So just, you know, a trick you can use for your students to have like constant revision again and again and again.
Mm-hmm. And once again, well, two more ideas for cool downs is, you know, depending on the structure you've been teaching. So here we've like 3 examples for present continuous, past simple, and going to. You know, you can write down a few sentences, you know, with that target structure you've been learning. And then you can ask your students to try and tell you, as you can see, it's based on the senses again, to tell you their sensory association. So for example, if you have a sentence like, I'm having breakfast, and you imagine this scene at home, like I'm having breakfast, what can you usually see? And your students will say something like, you know, I can see the kitchen, I can see my toaster, the coffee cup, etc. What can you hear? You can hear the boiling water and so on, right? Kinesthetic, what can you touch? Okay, hopefully not the boiling water.
No,
yeah.
No, don't touch.
Okay, so, you know, I can touch, you know, the fork, the knife, you know, the cutlery, crockery, and so on. And, you know, this is how it works. So they create association. Or you can work the other way around. You show them sentences with 3 associations, and then you ask them what the situation is or what the situation was. So if you can take a look at this first sentence, and, you know, you can read something like this: it was dark. So we've got visual. I could smell fried meat. We've got smell, and I could hear wood crackling. What do you think the situation was? What kind of scene is described by these 3 sentences? Yeah, picnic. Yeah, a fire. You know, a fire with some meat, perhaps. Okay, and so on. Barbecue. Yeah, this is how it works. Okay. So now, do you remember the first thing that we asked you to do? It was, you know, those questions. So now we're going to ask you just a few of these questions, okay?
Yes.
And we'd like you to type in the answers. So the first question: in what way is a lesson similar to jogging? Okay. So it's got various stages, but the first stage, is that it begins with.
I like this one. Needs a lot of energy.
Yeah, it begins with the warm up. Now then, we skip the second one. Is easier always better in the classroom? So it's a yes/no question. No, a definite no. Okay.
So can you describe? Sorry.
What's your
student's main goal in coming to class? Yeah,
survive. Yes, communication. Yes, after the survival. Okay, and we hope that you can suggest more than one creative way to finish a class. And now it's just a matter of finishing the session. And as we said, we can't really ask you to wave and shout. Thank you, that was amazing, because your family would seriously be considering calling the police or the doctor.
To hear, like a big thank you coming from
Ukraine. 400 people in Ukraine. Yeah, but if you have any comments or anything to say, you can leave your comments here on our Facebook page. And at this moment, we would really like to say thank you very much for your patience, for staying with us for 2 hours.
And all the kind words you gave us.
Kind words, nice. Talking to the screen, and we hope to see you again. Okay? Bye. Leave for a moment, and then we come back again.
Like an encore. Yeah, it's us again. Hello.
So, wait a second.
You want to listen to the next song? Yeah. Okay. So thank you. Now Nina will be taking.
There we go. Okay. Thank you very much, Czeslaw and Jacek. That was really amazing. Yeah. Wave and say amazing. Yeah. Thank you. You were really great. And right now, we're going to listen to our next presenter. This is Marta Rasinska. She is a teacher trainer, a teacher and a teacher mentor, and a speaker at lots of international conferences, and also the author of our well-known book, Get to 100. Her session is going to be dedicated to language chunks, and here we go, giving floor to you, Marta. Are you here? Okay. Looks like Marta needs some more time.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Right. Yeah.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Is it not too loud? Because sometimes my computer is too loud. Is it okay, the sound? Everybody?
Yes,
not
absolutely.
Too loud, not too, because I can always turn it up or turn it down.
Everything's perfect.
Okay, wonderful. Hello, my favorite Ukraine again. I think it's my third or fourth webinar for you, so I'm pleased to be back. What's the weather like in Ukraine? Because in Poland it's really very, very hot. Is it the same in your country, in your beautiful country? Because it's really very hot, too hot as well. Hello, hot and sunny. Okay, so we have to survive this somehow together. Okay, thank you once again for the